This evening's CyberTalk with John Vega, CEO of Capsule 8, will be moderated by Robert Jones. Robert is the president of the NYU Tandon Polytechnic Alumni Association, an NYU Tandon board member, and an NYU Alumni Association board member. He's the founder, president, and CEO of PreSafe Technologies, an emerging cybersecurity and operational security solution delivery company with an emphasis on protecting global digital assets supporting the nation, commercial businesses, critical infrastructure, and academic communities. He serves as the chairperson of the Air Traffic Control Association Aviation, Cybersecurity Programming Committee chair member. Robert, at this time, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Alexandra, and thank you to all of you who are joining us this evening. You can expect an engaging and insightful exchange between myself and John Vega. John Vega is, let's just say, an entrepreneur extraordinaire. He has some executive experience with McAfee and has contributed to open projects in the realm of encryption. He's also written a number of books, and what we most know John for is his success with two, not one, but two entrepreneurial ventures that he launched, one being SilverSky and the other being Capsule 8. And please think of what you might want to learn from a person like John, who is accomplished as he is this evening, and think about your questions now. We're going to take you through a series of those, and they may stimulate some more. But John, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'll start with the first question, and that is, what insight or motivation led you to launch the ventures that you did, the cybersecurity ventures that you did, be it SilverSky or more recently Capsule 8? Talk to us about your mindset and what all went into that.
Yeah, we'll do. Thanks, Robert. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be talking to everybody. So I've been in the security industry my entire career. It's been close to 25 years now. I started out doing software engineering. Like you said, I did open source, not in security. I did the Mailman mailing list manager when I was in college. That was me. I still have my friends make fun of me a lot for that one. And then accidentally stumbled into security, started doing academic research and consulting for companies like Visa and Symantec before security was that much of an industry. Was consulting around software security in particular. There were no resources available, so I co-authored the first book for developers on security well over 20 years ago now, and started a company doing that, which was not technically a failure, but it was close enough to it. So we got the investors their money back, but I was able to take my wife to a nice dinner, and that was about it. So that was a pretty interesting experience in that I learned that great technology wasn't everything, if that makes sense. So the first thing is that companies should be about solving problems for customers, and so you got to get close to them and understand what problems they have. That becomes easier and easier the more practical experience you have where you can relate to their problems. But you can often get people to talk about their problems and learn a lot if you're willing to listen, instead of assuming that because you're a great technologist, you have all the answers. So that was my first mistake, and people quickly disabused me of that. The other thing, though, the subtlety there is startups are not just about solving problems that people have through good technology. It's all about doing that in a way that hopefully solves much bigger problems much more effectively than the problems that you create. And that, I think, is something that people don't realize. Every startup creates new problems for its customers, and that could be your product not being as easy to use as you want it to be, but it also can be, well, now people have to buy the product, and that involves often involves people that are involved in purchasing and finance, managing payments, and just all sorts of call it friction that that you can put on your customers to research your product, test your product, use your product once they're actually customers, but then kind of continue to manage your product as well. And so it's not just the technical user of your product. So it's not, the technical user is not the only buyer. It's there's also like economic buyers and other shareholders that are going to be impacted by what you're doing. And so, you know, one of the things that is very easy to miss is that you've got to kind of factor in the whole end-to-end experience. Can you solve problems in a way that really provides a lot of value for a really important problem without making it too difficult to buy and to use, which is really where the biggest challenge is. You know, but I just kind of a little more on kind of the background leading up to the companies. After that kind of a company which sold to a competitor and which got sold to Hewlett Packard. But after that, I went to McAfee first as the chief security architect, which was, I owned all the core technology, but also getting McAfee into new product categories at the time. And this was in about 15, 16 years ago. So did lead a number of acquisitions and started building out you know, business and finance skills, which are surprisingly useful for learning how to do a startup on other people's money in particular. Like most people that are successful in tech startups go the venture capital route. You can make it without being in the venture capital route, but it's incredibly unusual and certainly very difficult, particularly if you don't have a success under your belt. The McAfee experience was great. Then I went to SilverSky, which you mentioned. SilverSky was actually not a company that I founded. I was recruited into it by its investors. Its investors were Goldman Sachs and Bessemer. That was a turnaround of a startup that had some success, but we took it from kind of plateaued, hadn't really built any intellectual property. It just built a great customer base, like United Airlines and Farmers Insurance, and about I think 12% of U.S. banks and credit unions. But it had essentially flatlined. It wasn't growing, and we turned that around very quickly, built some incredible intellectual property, really put the company on the map, and sold it about 4 years later to BAE Systems after a bidding war among a couple of people, just big household names. So after that, I was at BAE Systems, and I had the product. They had a few other commercial products and managed security services for their European customers, like large enterprises. And so I inherited responsibility for all those things, and was definitely hearing a lot about the kind of security challenges that we couldn't address, particularly around people's cloud infrastructure or Linux footprint that was sitting in a data center. And we had tried to build a service around commercial products to offer something to our customers. And I learned that there weren't any good ones. And then a few months later, a famous venture capitalist, I was having lunch with him, and he had invested in SourceFire, as the first investor in SourceFire, which did Snort. And I asked him, well, what are the biggest problems in the security space that nobody's doing a good job at right now? And he said, well, there's nobody doing a good job for threat, like attack detection and management for people's cloud infrastructure. The old school tools clearly don't work. What we need is something like a modern version of Snort that works in a cloud environment, deals with containers, and so on. That definitely passed the sniff test immediately with me, because we'd seen that in our customer base at BAE, and a couple of my friends and I got really excited about the idea, and that's how we ended up launching Capsule 8, which we've been doing for close to 5 years now. But actually 2 months ago, we were just acquired by Sophos, which is a very significant acquisition. So we had we went GA about 2 years ago now, and we're growing incredibly quickly, even through the pandemic. And we had a lot of large enterprise tech forward customers like Spotify and Cloudflare and Fastly and Snowflake and Databricks, but we also had US government customers, and even traditional large enterprises like the largest oil and gas company in the world is a customer. So that we managed to do that all very quickly, and we're really excited about Sophos, because we were certainly growing very quickly, but once we get integrated into the Sophos platform, if you don't know them, they are a very large security company. They're one that is very technology focused and is continue to keep up with changes in the technology landscape, unlike Symantec and McAfee, which kind of are on a steep decline. Sophos is doing $1 billion in revenue, growing incredibly quickly. Will probably go public in the not too distant future, and just was very technology focused and had a massive user base that they could bring this to, because they do essentially a lot of the same things we did, but for like Windows in particular and Mac. But the industry's long seen the need for Linux, which we were really the only game in town. So that's kind of how the story behind the launch is in a nutshell.
Very good, very good. Linux is well known, or at least most believe that Linux is a robust operating system. So you were rather shrewd to pay attention to that space and develop a comprehensive suite of solutions around it. That was rather insightful on your behalf. Yeah. Question. There was something you said in your remarks. You talked about a company and failing with that. But as you continued to deliver your remarks, it's clear that failure did not discourage you. Can you say something about that before I go to the next question? That was something that you mentioned, and I want to draw that point out.
Well, it's a good point. Look, I think that there's an adage that goes along the lines of you can't succeed without having a lot of failure that you've learned from. And I think you can always hit the jackpot and get really lucky the first time, but for most people that are really successful, they've got a lot of they've had a lot of opportunities to learn, and they seize them and learn as much as they can from them. The best learning usually does come from failing, and being able to say, well, why did that happen? And well, what should I have known? What could I have done differently? I have seen a lot of people that failed and didn't learn from it. They always just kind of point the blame at somebody else, some external force. And it's really not about blame. It's trying to, everybody wants to be the protagonist in their own story. And so they want to have any problems be somebody else's fault. But if you can be more objective about it than that, then you're well positioned to make yourself more successful in the future, because everybody could do things better pretty much all the time, right? So if we're always trying to introspect and learn more, it's not that there's something wrong with us, it's that we're trying to learn and do better next time. But any chance to learn, whether it's failure-based or not, like being at McAfee after that failure and looking at all these startups, some successful, some not, was a great learning opportunity where I didn't personally have to do any failing. I could just kind of study other companies' successes and failures and compare it all to that and my past experience, which had a failure in it for sure, but that definitely provided context. So I think that looking at your professional career as a learning experience is really important, particularly if you want to be successful in a startup. If you're not open to taking advice from other people, from learning, then you're very unlikely to be successful.
I wanted to make sure we touched on that point so that people get the sense that it's an iterative process. That's for sure. So I'll touch on this next topic here. What experiences did you encounter that were more difficult than you expected? A little more difficult than you expected. I want to come to the optimistic side with the other half of that question, but what can you say was more difficult?
Yeah, I'm going to limit that one to just encapsulate the most recent company, and there's plenty to talk about there. First, Linux security, it was clear that while it was clear that the industry was 5 years ago when we started was just treating it as a box ticking exercise, like we've got endpoint security for Windows and okay, we've got a Linux version. We thought, well, okay, there's no one who's really focused on Linux and doing it well, but we actually didn't realize, really, despite our experiences with kind of large applications, SaaS applications, we didn't realize how hard it would be to do well. So it took us longer to get a product out the door, a lot longer to get a product out the door that worked than we wanted it to. We had great design partners, Fastly being one of them, who were very invested in our success and were very patient in helping us learn how to get it right. And the security side of things wasn't the problem. What ends up happening is our customer base was a lot of people with very busy, very complicated applications. And if they don't do much security in those environments, not just because of the lack of software, but because there's a lot of risk to doing security in those environments. If you want to run like an agent to collect telemetry in those environments, well, it could slow down the system. If it's a kernel module, it could crash the system. And you need to be able to behave gracefully to be able to live in that kind of ecosystem. So if something like somebody, Spotify's servers are getting slammed all of a sudden, then we need to be able to kind of make sure that we're not the straw that breaks the camel's back and takes down some of their infrastructure. That would be kind of a kiss of death. So we have to make sure that we're good corporate citizens, and that's not really a problem in the desktop world. So we had to kind of fundamentally architect everything a lot differently, and we kind of knew it at the beginning because we did a lot of interviews of people to see what challenges they had when trying to shoestring something together for themselves. But the devil is in the details, and it still took us a really long time to get kind of the performance management right, more than performance, like reliability, stability, just kind of all the non-functional requirements. The other thing that was more difficult than I expected was the just kind of the people relationships, particularly with the pandemic. Nobody really could have anticipated that everybody would be remote for as long as we've been. When it happened, when everybody started going into lockdown, nobody had any idea whether people would even be buying software 6 months later, and put a lot of stress on people, whether they were happy at work or not. And so, I think that, and it led to some just kind of interpersonal issues I think that that was all a lot more difficult than I expected. I spent a lot more time at Capsule 8 essentially being an armchair psychologist for people than I ever would have expected. And I'm a computer engineer at heart, so I don't really have the best social skills myself. So it's tough for me to do that, but it was important to do.
Sure. Thank you so much. For the optimistic side of that question, what experiences did you encounter that were easier than you expected?
So in the case of Capsule 8, it was getting our name out there. That usually is one of the hardest things for companies to do, even if they've got a really important problem. They've got relationships that will get them good design partners and early customers, and even investors. But getting your name out there, marketing that is often really challenging. And in security, it's particularly challenging because there's something like 4,000 different companies doing security, computer security right now, and growing rapidly. It may even be way more than that now. And only like, I don't know, 5 years ago, it was under 1,300. I know. I remember Ed Amoroso, who probably many people know, used to be the CISO at AT&T, and is affiliated with NYU. He has long kept track of every possible security vendor. And I remember when we started Capsule 8 5 years ago, he was really tickled that he was just coming up on 1,337 companies. So it was elite, and now it's over 4,000. So that's really explosive growth, and makes it really hard to stand out in what's kind of in a sense, it's a big market. It feels big, but it's small compared to like consumer markets and plenty of other enterprise markets. So we somehow managed. I would give credit to Meg O'Leary, who was our chief marketing officer in the early days. She really was phenomenal at getting us out there and getting people to consider us. And that in my experience has typically been one of the hardest things to do. And even I see a lot of entrepreneurs that or people that want to be entrepreneurs that will build a cool piece of open source that should solve people's problems. And they put it out there, but there's just so much out there that nobody ever really pays attention to it. So, that's a real challenge that we got lucky on, that many people struggle with.
Yeah, on that line, I had a question that's come into me, and it's related to that, getting the name out. And the question is, what were your strategies for getting your name out there for Capsule 8? I know you just mentioned that you had someone in the organization responsible for that, but is there a particular strategy that you might be able to share that would be useful to the audience?
Well, so part of it was that myself and my three other co-founders were all already very well known in security, and one of them in particular was tremendously good at Twitter and already had a big presence, and that helped amplify anything we said. But I also believe very strongly that the venture capital world is scary, and many entrepreneurs are turned off. But like I said at the beginning, it amplifies your ability to succeed. And part of that is real companies look at your venture capitalists and use that as part of the signal they use in their buying process. And the better the venture capital firms you have invested in you, the more likely they are to pay attention to you. And in our case, we had Bessemer, which is a tier 1 traditional VC that's been big on SaaS and good at security and things like that. We had Intel Ventures, and we had other board members who were really incredibly well known in the security space. All of that played a part, was part of why we got lucky. So it takes a lot of experience and skill to get lucky sometimes. The other thing that I would say that's particular to kind of selling into tech audiences and secure, like anything in security, this is true, but not necessarily consumer type tech, is that you're going to get your name out there a lot better and have people take you much more seriously as a company if you do a lot of kind of very technical evangelism, essentially. And what I mean by that is things like tech blogging and conference talks, where people see that your company is really, really smart. It helps if it's also clear that your company is really solving important problems, because if you have to kind of do both, you have to both be really smart and clearly be solving some really meaningful, important problem. And then you can start to get people's attention, especially in the security space. Like I said, security is, if you think about it really, in an ideal world, you're protecting people from the unknown unknowns, as some people like to say. And if you're not a security expert, you want to put your faith in the people who seem to be the smartest at it, if all other things are equal. And so the technical evangelism is a really important signal to security buyers that you're likely to be good. Other customers as another strong signal. So kind of your market presence and your technical chops are both really important in the security market.
So if I were to sort of summarize that, you have to build trust in the marketplace, and some of that trust is coming through the investment that you get from organizations that are recognized for their due diligence and establishing the confidence, and of course you've got a good product. You were talking earlier about that parasitic load, and making sure that being a good corporate citizen in that Linux environment was very important. So product quality is paramount as well. Yeah, very good. Thank you.
One other thing to say, I think that that it's helpful to have a big megaphone too. But the other thing that I'd say is, like, while you want to be technical, put a lot of technical content out there, more and more people, especially tech people, hate being explicitly sold to. So it's not like our smart people with a big Twitter presence were trying to overtly shill for the company. We were just out there talking about interesting things, and many of that would give people indirect insight into the company and what it was doing, that leads people to go, oh, those people must be doing something really, really cool, even though we didn't, I've never wanted to do a lot of self-promotion, and none of the people that I've worked with here have ever really wanted to do that either. It tends to backfire for most people. I think some people are good at it, but generally in the security space, it's all about both having a good product, good marketing, but also having good technical chops to back it up.
Yeah, very good. So we touched on some of the things that were difficult, some of the things more difficult than you expected, some easier than you expected. At what point did you realize that you had success within reach? Again, was it funding, some regulatory approval, a market surprise? I mean, here we have the pandemic that has done so much. It drove customers perhaps to adopt the cloud more readily. Of course, there's a whole lot more computing that's going on from home offices, and a near significant growth of endpoints in the environment. When did you realize with Capsule 8 that, hey, this is going to be a success?
Well, I guess I don't really think about things like that. I think that I did early in my career, and in my experience over the last 25 years, startups almost always mammothly overestimate how successful they're going to be. And even when I've seen plenty of companies that have customers and revenue, and they're growing pretty fast, so they think that they're going to become wildly successful, and then all of a sudden they find out that their technology doesn't scale or their sales motion doesn't scale, and it all becomes relatively a failure. And so, I've also have thought a lot about over the years, well, what is it that we consider success? Is it making ourselves a personal fortune? And I've been lucky enough early enough in my career that I've always been successful enough and done well, and I stopped pretty early kind of measuring myself based on financial success, although that's great too. I've always been really excited and motivated by the impact that I'm able to have, and I find that the employees that I've had generally resonate well with that impact, and want to be part of something that they think is going to have that impact. I'd say that in my career, like if I bought a product or built a product at McAfee, I could get 100 million people using that product in a year, and that's a really cool feeling to know that you're impacting that many people. I did a crypto algorithm with David McGrew at Cisco called GCM that is everywhere. Like it's a standard everywhere. It encrypts, like Cloudflare has said it encrypts something like 2/3 to 3/4 of all the encrypted traffic on the internet, which is shocking. Didn't make any money for that. That was totally open. Was possibly the most rewarding thing I've ever done in my life because of the impact that it's had on the industry. So, I think that everybody should be thinking about, what's meaningful to them. Are they in it only for the money, or is it that sure, you like money, but also you're trying to save the world or have a big impact on the world? And I think people that are really passionate about both, the impact ultimately is more important. So, and I've learned you never know what to expect. Like a lot of companies that were on a really good growth rate, startups of people that I know that are on a really good growth rate, shuttered during the pandemic because they needed more money to keep growing. They wouldn't be profitable without money, and the timing was just really poor. Nobody knew what was going to happen, and they needed money at exactly the wrong time. So that had essentially nothing to do with them, because the playbook for success in tech right now is to build, to grow at all costs, not worry about profit, keep reinvesting as much cash as you can in high growth until you suck up all the oxygen in the room, so that you're the big dominant player. And when the growth finally levels out, that's when you can turn to profitability. So which hopefully is very far down the line when you're a big public company. And so those companies that got caught behind the 8 ball, like running out of cash, even though they were by all kind of modern metrics on a really successful trajectory, that's no fault of their own. And so I didn't really think, well, success is in our reach until we got acquired by Sophos, because we could say, well, we've had this tremendous growth, we've had these tremendous marquee customers that security companies don't tend to get. They tend to get like stodgier brands. Tech companies tend to want to do things themselves. But it wasn't until we could say, well, Sophos, we know that we're going to be able to get this now on hundreds of thousands and millions of cloud instances over the next few years. That was really when we knew success was in reach. And I'd say some people would say at that point we've already had our success because, wow, everybody made a lot of money. But for me, that's just the point where it was finally in reach, where we could have the impact that I'm doing this for. Like I don't think that it's very rewarding for people to invest years of their life, build something they're proud of, and then have it not exist 2 years later. And that does happen in plenty of acquisitions. And it kind of happened with SilverSky for us. So, that was, like I said, we built a lot of cool IPs, and that BAE kind of ended up gutting it over time, and it's not a great feeling that we didn't have the impact that the technology should have had. And so I think that it's important for people to understand what they want to get out of it beyond just the money. Like, are they going to be happy if they walk away without having that impact?
Sure. And that's very important. So you clearly are identifying success with having a positive impact and making the world a better place. And I think that is really the purpose for so many things. And certainly the purpose of technology, right? I mean, to make the world a better place. I'm going to ask one more question here, and then try to make sure I weave in questions from the audience. You've already touched on a portion of this, but I'm going to ask you about a couple of words. And you've already defined, your sense of success, your feeling of success. But the words are curiosity, imagination, creativity, leadership, education, and you've already talked about passion. How do some of those words contribute to the progress / success that you were articulating a moment ago?
All those things are certainly important. I would, and we could talk about each of them, but some of the ones that are often overlooked that I think are worth emphasizing is communication. That's kind of a subset of leadership in some respect, but one of the biggest problems in tech companies end to end is good communication. I can't say that I've ever heard somebody say, oh yeah, we get great communication here. And so that's with your customers, with prospects, with your employees, and really having a collaborative environment where information gets to where it needs to go without having people feeling bogged down. That's usually a moving target. And the better you do at that, I think that you increase your odds tremendously. And a thing that's kind of flows through some of these, like the curiosity, imagination, and passion, it's really the I call it empathy. And what I mean by that is empathy for the customer. I think that, like I said at the beginning, most successful businesses in tech are about solving important problems for that customer and the customer. So you got to really be empathetic to a large number of people to understand the commonalities that people have that you can address. Customers are generally pretty happy to talk about the problems. They may even have in mind the solution. They're usually wrong about what a good solution is. People are masters of their own problem, but if they were good at knowing what the solution is, then they wouldn't still have the problem, you would hope. So that's where the imagination, creativity, and often kind of education and curiosity can help, is if you really kind of have that empathy and can get a good understanding of what the opportunity is to go solve problems, then you can hopefully come up with better mousetrap, and like I said at the beginning, one that solves those important problems without creating a bunch of new ones.
Very good. Very good. I'm going to try to, we're approaching 6:50 here. Wanted to reach out to participant Amy Batalonis for a question.
Hi, Robert. Thanks for calling on me, and John. Thank you so much for the insight. I just want to mention I'm actually a bit loosely connected with you as a fellow adjunct instructor at NYU. I did some work at IEEE, and I currently work at Blackstone, and I know that our former CISO, I believe, is on the Capsule 8 board. So a little loose connections there.
Yeah, and your current CISO went to high school with my wife.
Oh, even closer then. Yeah, Fletcher, Adam Fletcher.
Yeah, it's funny. They were both from Florida, and I was at RSA once, and I met Adam for the first time, and he said, "Oh, you're John Vega? I went to high school with your wife."
I'll let him know tomorrow when I talk to him that I spoke with you.
Yeah.
But anyway, really great insights today. And one question that I have is, you alluded to this a little bit throughout the conversation, but there's a lot of products and entrepreneurs out there and startups, and there's like a whole sea of startups out there. And if you've seen good products or entrepreneurs or startups fail, what do you find is the most prevalent fatal flaw that they have?
That's a great question. I don't know if I've ever, and great question is code for give me a minute to think about an answer. There's probably several common fatal flaws. The one that first jumps to mind is I kind of alluded to before, which is entrepreneurs are often confident that they have the right answer, particularly when they've invested a lot of time and energy into the tech that they have today, and they feel like they know the customer's problems better. And so the second thing that I would say is that lack of understanding of all the other friction that their product creates. So, I've seen lots of entrepreneurs not really think about not just what are the struggles that a company might go through when they're trying to buy your product or test your product or get support for your product. So not only do they not understand that part of the customer journey, that's a huge opportunity missed because they're not thinking about, well, what could I be doing to eliminate those problems too? So, what can I automate something to make this easier? You lose that opportunity if you just kind of assume that it's all about the tech and the product.
Great, thank you.
Good, very good, great question, Amy. Frank Named, I'm going to reach out to you for a question. You may be on mute. You may be muted, Frank.
Okay, I just unmuted myself. No, thank you so much for a great presentation. John, you made a real point that you need to be flexible, intellectually flexible, to basically succeed. You need to listen. You need to understand your customers. You need to understand your competitors. You need to understand the technology and the evolution of the technology. But at some point, as a company, as a startup grows to a certain success, you need to transition yourself to more administrative. You mentioned that you got some serious financial boost information and something, but at some point, where do you basically you're motivated by the results and how you help the world and all that stuff, not necessarily financial, but at some point you need to change to diverse yourself a little bit from the technology, hand it over to somebody and start thinking more in terms of administration and I just lost.
Yeah.
At what point do you do that?
It really can depend upon the entrepreneur, to be perfectly honest with you, and what experience they have. I do think that it's always good when you've got a big need to scale yourself, to hire someone to fill a role that's that you need most urgently, and have it be someone as overqualified as possible for that role. So even if on day one I were starting out doing everything for the company, the day I decided that, well, I really need to find somebody better than me for the sales role, because I'm not going to scale myself anymore, then I go and get the best person I can find to do that. And being able to partially, I guess the track record helps, but being able to really kind of sell the vision of the impact we're going to have has always helped me recruit the right people as well. So I guess typical guidance for that, though, is that you really don't often need like a marketing person or like finance person for the first couple of years. Whether you need like product management quickly will depend on the entrepreneur, but that could end up being a good early hire. Could be somebody who's better at hiring engineering teams. It really can depend. And I think that but like typical milestones would say you're hiring your first salesperson like a little bit before when you're first expecting to sell the product, when it's getting kind of close to done, and that could be someone who's more senior. And I think that investors, if you have them, are always going to be pushing you to get the best possible people to supplement your experience and to get the team that they invest in as much experience as possible. Like venture capitalists love entrepreneurs that are obviously easy to coach, that meaning like take advice really well. And some of them grow into like really strong operational execs, even with very little experience. So there's no one good answer to that in my experience.
Okay, very good. A question that came in, any advice for getting organizational buy-in for an open standard in a large for-profit organization, particularly within organizations that generally value IP over transparency? That's
Yeah, I'm not even sure I understand enough context in the question to answer it. Did the person who asked it want to maybe give a little more context to us? Somebody.
Hi. Sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Thanks. So you talked earlier about GCM and getting that into the world being one of your most valuable experiences in your career. I work for a large multinational corporation and have found it difficult to get buy-in from our business end on publishing an open standard when we can maintain a proprietary protocol. I was wondering if you had any kind of context of how you were able to get agreement from non-engineers for building an open protocol and standard.
Yeah, so when I've done standards work, that was mainly at the beginning of my career when I was a startup guy. And so I was the small person getting involved in the startup, the standardization process. And so I have insight, not but just not sitting in your shoes. So Cisco actually paid me to work with them on GCM, and I had done some work on a predecessor to the problem, which is why they came to me, that was a good theoretical start to solving some problems they had, and they knew they could make it a lot better and drag me into it. And then, but I knew about the problem because I had friends friends of the guy who was running the security working group at the Internet Engineering Task Force at the time. So I was kind of familiar with the problems that people were tackling. So I guess what I would say is those the people on the business side there generally understand only when the market makes it clear that kind of get to adopt a solution to a problem that they think is important, where they can sell a lot, that it's got to be an industry standard. So, and if you can show them that they're going to make a lot more money because they're going to have a lot bigger market if other people are using the same standard, then you might have a case. And I think that they are probably concerned about giving away all of their value, and that says that they're pretty insecure that they could offer more value on top of the standard. And so you really have to help paint the picture of where their distinctive competence is that's really going to allow them to continue winning, and also show how other people in the industry will kind of help grow the market if you do this. So that's certainly the dynamic that I saw in the market that led to GCM becoming a thing. In that case, it was everybody wanted like high speed router to router, like just very high speed encryption at the appliance level, and it clearly required hardware acceleration, and patents were an issue from a cost basis perspective, and that was something that was in everybody's best interest to have interoperability. Otherwise, nobody was likely to adopt just something that Cisco was proposing that you use. It had to be like Cisco saw it as they were going to have a much better time selling routers if they were first to market with better hardware, but if it was an open standard, if that makes sense. So that's I would say is kind of the standardization playbook. Is that helpful?
Very helpful. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Very good. Well, we're right at the 7 o'clock hour, at the top of the hour. I certainly want to thank everyone who joined and participated, but above all, I want to thank you, John, for an enormously insightful and informative presentation. It's clear that you're passionate about it, and your journey has been extraordinary. And I'm sure that there's a whole lot more success to come. Thank you very much. Over to you, Alexandra.
Thank you, Robert and John. We ask everyone to consider joining us tomorrow for our Tandon Alumni Entrepreneurial Showcase. It'll take place from 4 to 5 p.m. Thank you very much and have a great evening.